Another Day, Another Story. Written in the 1920s and rediscovered in 2008, memoirs supposedly written by the real Jack the Ripper were published today. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. Typed on yellowed pages with a handmade cover, the manuscript that inspired the new book comes from an unlikely source, Sidney George Hume Beeman, the British author and illustrator who created the Toy Town radio series for children. Beeman wrote in a preface that a one-legged acquaintance named James Carnock, whom he describes as having a streak of cynical and macabre humor, bequeathed the document to him in the 1920s and asked that it be published after his death. Beeman also claimed to have omitted certain particularly revolting passages from the original text and expressed his personal opinion that Carnock was indeed Jack the Ripper. Did Beeman himself pen the alleged autobiography, using a centuries-old literary convention in which a writer presents fictional memoirs as a found document? It's hard to believe that the man who became famous for his Larry the Lamb character would reconstruct grisly crime scenes in his spare time. Beeman's output was solely for children, and this would have been a huge departure from what he is known for, said Alan Hicken, owner of the Montacute TV Radio and Toy Museum in Somerset, England. In 2008, the museum acquired the Carnock manuscript along with a collection of artwork, photographs and books once owned by Beeman, who died in 1932. Ripper expert Paul Berg, who wrote an analysis of the manuscript that appears in the published version, also pointed out that the autobiography sharply contrasts with the rest of Beeman's oeuvre. Archival research has failed to unearth evidence that a James Carnock who fit Beeman's description ever existed, however, suggesting that the author chose a pseudonym to mask his or her true identity. Berg said the supposed memoirs probably won't bring us any closer to solving the infamous Jack the Ripper case, which went cold more than a century ago. And yet certain aspects of the book, including the author's intimate familiarity with Whitechapel's 1888 geography, suggest there might be more to the story, he said. The manuscript is a fiction, but the question is whether or not there is a factual core, that is to say, a genuine confession at its heart, Berg said. Hicken commented that whoever wrote the manuscript had knowledge that does not appear to be derived from newspapers or other publications at the time it was written. Forensic psychologist Richard Walter dismissed any link between the Carnock text and the real Ripper, maintaining that serial killers wouldn't document their crimes for posterity in a dramatic fashion. One would not expect a sadist, which Jack the Ripper was, to be self-disclosing, he said. They are interested in creating a myth greater than what they are. They would not simply hand a book like that over to somebody who was probably going to exploit it. Walter added that, although he has only seen fragments of the manuscript, it seems to lack the cadence of violence typical of serial killers. He also mentioned the long tradition of impersonating the notorious murderer, which began with the hundreds of letters, nearly all deemed hoaxes, sent to Scotland Yard and signed Jack the Ripper during and after his deadly rampage. Even assuming that James Carnock, whoever he was, shouldn't be added to the still-growing list of proposed suspects, his book has a special place in the history of Jack the Ripper fiction, sometimes known as Ripperature. Numerous novels and stories based on the Whitechapel murders appeared in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a time when the psychology behind crimes like Jack the Ripper's was poorly understood. Back then, writers tended to offer reasons for their violent protagonists' psychotic behavior, something Carnock distinctly doesn't do. The manuscript is important as an early piece of Ripper fiction and crime fiction, insofar as it is a rare example of a story written from the point of view of the villain, Berg explained. As Ripper fiction, it is unusual because it doesn't attempt to provide any real mitigation or, significantly, a motive. In fact, it is very modern in its concept of a serial killer as someone who kills because he likes it, which could be taken as a pointer to there being a genuine factual core. Now available from Bantam Press, the autobiography of Jack the Ripper is sure to draw attention from Ripperologists and crime fiction fans alike. Recalling his discovery of the manuscript, Hicken said, "I couldn't put it down and read the entire document in one night. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end and struck me as very macabre. I knew I had discovered something startling. The original document will go on display later this year at the Montacute Museum, where it will be a chilling addition to a collection composed largely of toys, puppets, games and vintage televisions. Jack the Ripper is the nickname given to an unidentified serial killer who operated in and around the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. The name Jack the Ripper was coined in letters sent to the police and the media during the time of the murders. The Ripper is infamous for a series of brutal and gruesome murders of women, most of whom were prostitutes, that occurred between August and November 1888. The identity of Jack the Ripper remains a mystery to this day, and the case has become one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in the history of crime. Many suspects and theories have been proposed over the years, but none have been definitively proven. Some of the victims included Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. The modus operandi of Jack the Ripper typically involved slashing the throats of his victims and mutilating their bodies. The level of violence and the apparent knowledge of human anatomy led some to speculate that the killer might have had some medical knowledge. The case generated widespread panic and fear in the Whitechapel area and prompted a significant police investigation. Despite the passage of time, the Jack the Ripper case continues to capture the public's imagination, and it has been the subject of numerous books, films, and television series. Various theories and suspects have been proposed, but the true identity of Jack the Ripper remains unknown, and the case remains one of the most enduring and perplexing mysteries in the history of true crime. Shadows of Whitechapel. In the dimly lit alleys of Victorian London, a young detective becomes obsessed with solving the Jack the Ripper case. As he delves deeper into the investigation, he discovers a secret society operating in the shadows of Whitechapel. This society has its own agenda and is determined to stop the detective from uncovering the truth. The story explores the detective's relentless pursuit of justice while navigating the dangerous underworld of 19th-century London. The Ripper's legacy. In present-day London, a modern-day detective stumbles upon a series of murders that bear a striking resemblance to the Jack the Ripper killings. As she investigates, she becomes entangled in a web of conspiracy and historical secrets. Uncovering hidden diaries and letters, she finds connections between the past and the present, leading her to confront a descendant of the original Ripper, who believes it's their destiny to continue the legacy of the infamous killer. Letters from the Abyss. A series of letters supposedly written by Jack the Ripper surface in the 21st century, detailing the reasons behind the murders and claiming the Ripper's intent was to cleanse society. A journalist receives these letters and becomes obsessed with decoding the cryptic messages within them. As the journalist delves deeper into the letters' meaning, they are led on a dark journey, uncovering long-buried secrets and facing the moral dilemma of whether to publish the shocking revelations within the letters. The Ripper's Revenge. In an alternative history where the Ripper was never caught, the ghosts of his victims haunt the streets of Whitechapel. A medium with the ability to communicate with spirits is drawn to the area and begins to unravel the mysteries surrounding the Ripper's identity. The spirits of the victims provide clues, leading the medium on a supernatural investigation that takes them to the heart of Victorian London's occult societies and hidden magical practices. Ripper's Diary. A young historian stumbles upon a hidden diary believed to be written by Jack the Ripper himself. The diary reveals the Ripper's motivations, methods, and a startling revelation: he had a partner in crime. The historian embarks on a quest to authenticate the diary while being pursued by a shadowy organization that wants to keep the diary's contents hidden. The story explores the historian's race against time to uncover the truth before they become the Ripper's next target. Ripper's Resurgence. In a future society where advanced technology has eradicated most crime, a series of murders reminiscent of Jack the Ripper's style shocks the city. Detectives in this futuristic world are perplexed by the vintage brutality in a high-tech age. As they delve into the case, they uncover a dark secret society that worships the infamous Ripper. The story explores the clash between ancient brutality and futuristic technology. The Ripper's Curse. In a small, isolated town, a series of killings identical to Jack the Ripper's occur every few decades, each time terrorizing the community. A historian researching the town's history discovers a pattern and begins a race against time to prevent the next cycle of murders. The story combines elements of mystery, horror, and folklore, exploring the idea of a supernatural curse haunting the town. Ripper's apprentice, a young medical student in Victorian London, unwittingly becomes the apprentice to Jack the Ripper, believing him to be a legitimate doctor. As the student becomes increasingly involved in the Ripper's gruesome activities, they struggle with their conscience and the fear of becoming the Ripper's next victim. This story delves into the psychological aspects of a person's descent into darkness and their struggle for redemption. Chasing shadows. In the 21st century, a brilliant criminologist discovers a series of coded messages hidden within historical documents related to the Jack the Ripper case. The codes, when deciphered, lead to a hidden society dedicated to continuing the Ripper's work. As the criminologist races against time to stop the modern-day Ripper, they must navigate a complex web of historical clues and contemporary technology. This story blends elements of historical research, cryptography, and modern crime-solving techniques. The Ripper's legacy, a family secret. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a woman discovers her family's dark secret: her ancestor was Jack the Ripper. As she grapples with this horrifying revelation, she starts experiencing visions and urges related to the Ripper's crimes. The story follows her journey as she investigates her family's past, exploring the possibility of an inherited trait or a supernatural connection to the infamous killer. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.